He stood beside his father's hospital bed, gripping the rail as the monitor stuttered between steady beeps and fragile silence. But it wasn't the fear of losing his father that broke Ethan Cole, it was the sound of laughter behind him. His wife, Vanessa, stood with her arms folded, smirking as she called him a man with nothing. What she didn't know was that the broke husband she mocked was a billionaire heir. And the truth was seconds away from surfacing. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hours earlier, the room had felt tense but controlled, like a storm waiting just outside the walls. Ethan stood quietly at the edge of the hospital bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. The Fusi suite was too bright, too clean, too detached from what was actually happening inside it. Machines hummed softly. The oxygen line rested beneath his father's nose. Elijah Cole, a man who had always seemed unshakable, now looked small against the white sheets. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I'm here, Dad," he whispered, his voice low and steady, despite the pressure building in his chest. Elijah's eyes were half open, unfocused, but there was movement, just enough to suggest he heard him. That was enough to keep Ethan grounded. Enough to keep him from falling apart completely. Behind him, heels clicked against the polished floor. Vanessa entered the room like she was stepping into a business meeting, not a moment of life and death. Her blazer was sharp, her makeup flawless, her expression untouched by grief. Her family followed closely behind, her mother with a tight smile, her father scanning the room, her brother leaning casually against the wall like he was waiting for entertainment. Ethan didn't turn immediately. He didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air the moment they walked in. "Wow," Vanessa said after a beat, her voice cutting through the quiet. "So this is it?" Ethan slowly turned his head. "Vanessa, not right now." She tilted her head slightly, unimpressed. "When, Ethan? Because it's always not right now with you." Her brother let out a short laugh. "Man, look at him, still acting like something's gonna change." Ethan felt the words land, but he didn't react. Not here, not in front of his father. For years he had learned how to stay still when people expected him to break. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound controlled, but not enough to hide the edge. "You've had years to prove something, Ethan, years. And this?" She gestured vaguely at the room. "This is what it all comes down to." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his tone remained calm. "My father is dying." "And," she shot back, "that doesn't suddenly make you more of a man." Silence stretched for a moment, heavy, sharp. Ethan turned away from her again, focusing back on the bed. His father's breathing had slowed, each inhale more deliberate than the last. That mattered more than anything Vanessa had to say. Behind him, her mother spoke up, voice sweet but hollow. "Vanessa, honey, you don't have to carry this alone. You tried with him. We all saw that." "Tried?" Ethan repeated under his breath, not turning. Her father chuckled softly. "We thought he had potential. Guess we were wrong." Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Not in defeat, in control. He had heard versions of this for years. Not ambitious enough, not successful enough, not good enough for Vanessa. And every time he had chosen silence, not because he agreed, but because explaining himself would have revealed more than he was ready to show. A faint vibration buzzed in his pocket. Ethan ignored it at first, but it came again, persistent and controlled. He stepped slightly to the side and glanced down. Unknown number. He hesitated, then declined the call. Almost immediately, a text followed. "This is Charles Whitmore. I've been trying to reach you. It's about your father. Urgent." Ethan's eyes lingered on the screen for half a second longer than necessary. He slipped the phone back into his pocket without a word. Vanessa noticed the movement. "What? Another job rejection," she said, her tone light but sharp. Ethan didn't answer. Because the truth was, he hadn't been looking for jobs. Not the way she thought. But that truth wasn't something he could explain in a room like this. Not while his father lay there. Not while everything still depended on timing. He stepped closer to the bed again, lowering his voice. "I'm here, Dad. Don't worry about anything else." For a brief second, Elijah's fingers twitched. Ethan froze. Then slowly, carefully, he took his father's hand. It was warm. Weak but present. Behind him, Vanessa exhaled loudly, clearly irritated. Unbelievable, she muttered, still playing the same role. Ethan's grip tightened slightly, but his voice stayed soft. You should leave, that caught her off guard. What did you say? You heard me, Ethan replied, still not turning. You don't need to be here. Her brother stepped forward instantly. Man, who do you think you're talking to? Ethan finally turned, and for the first time there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not fear. Distance. I'm talking to people who don't respect this moment, he said quietly. The room shifted. Vanessa narrowed her eyes, studying him like she was seeing something unfamiliar. But instead of stepping back, she smiled, a slow, cold smile. Respect? She repeated. You want respect? Earn it. Ethan didn't respond, because deep down he already knew something she didn't, and for now that silence was his power. Behind him, Elijah's breathing changed again, slower, heavier, and just before the monitor stuttered, his father's lips moved, forming the faintest whisper. You don't know. Ethan leaned closer, his heart pounding. Who you married? The words barely escaped. But they changed everything. Ethan didn't move for a second after his father's words faded into the hum of the machines. You don't know who you married. The sentence echoed in his mind, heavy, unfinished, like it was meant to open something, but instead, it left him standing in confusion. His father's grip weakened in his hand, the faint pressure disappearing as quickly as it had come. Dad? Ethan whispered, leaning closer, no response. Just the slow rise and fall of his chest uneven now. Behind him, Vanessa let out a soft, dismissive laugh. What was that supposed to mean? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't understand it himself. Her brother snorted. Man, even at the end, he talking in riddles. Guess it runs in the family. That did it. Ethan straightened slowly, still holding his father's hand for one last second before letting it rest back on the sheet. He turned. Not sharply, not aggressively, but with a quiet firmness that shifted the energy in the room. I asked you to leave, he said. Vanessa blinked, surprised by the tone more than the words. Excuse me? You heard me. His voice stayed low, controlled. This isn't a place for whatever this is. Her mother stepped forward immediately. Now wait a minute. No. Ethan cut in, still calm. There's nothing to discuss. That was new. For years, he had absorbed their comments, their jokes, their constant evaluations. He had nodded, apologized, explained, tried to meet expectations that were never clearly defined. But not now, not here. Vanessa crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. You really think you get to tell me what to do right now? I'm your wife. Ethan held her gaze. And you're disrespecting my father while he's still breathing. The words landed harder than anything he had said before. For a split second, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe even irritation at being called out so directly, but it didn't last. She recovered quickly, her lips curling into that same cold smile. You're emotional. That's what this is. You always get like this when things get real. Ethan almost laughed at that. Emotional, as if grief was weakness. As if standing here watching his father slip away was just another moment for her to judge. I'm not emotional, he said quietly. I'm done pretending this is normal. Her brother stepped closer, his posture tightening. You better watch how you talk, man. Ethan didn't even look at him. Or what? The room went still. That question hung there, heavier than it should have been, because for the first time, Ethan wasn't backing down. He wasn't softening his tone or stepping away. He was standing exactly where he was. Vanessa noticed it too. Her eyes sharpened slightly, as if she was trying to figure out what had changed. But instead of pulling back, she leaned in. You know what? She said, her voice lowering. This is exactly the problem. You always act like you're above everything, like you're hiding something bigger than you actually are. Ethan's chest tightened, but his face didn't change. Because she wasn't wrong about one thing. He was hiding something, just not in the way she thought. I'm not hiding anything, he said. She laughed. Please, you don't even have a real job right now, Ethan. You've been coasting for years, living like this. She gestured around the room as if the hospital itself proved her point. And you expect me to respect that? Her father chimed in, voice low but cutting. A man should provide. Simple as that. Ethan turned his head slightly, finally acknowledging him. And you think you know everything about what I do? I know what I see, the man replied, and I don't see much. Ethan let that sit, because explaining himself wouldn't help. It never had, not when their entire view of him was built on assumptions they never questioned. His phone vibrated again, stronger this time, longer. Ethan didn't reach for it immediately, but the tension built in his chest again. That same name, that same message sitting unread. Charles Whitmore. He stepped back slightly, creating space between himself and the group. I'm stepping out for a minute, he said. Vanessa scoffed. Of course you are. He ignored her and walked toward the door. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, the air felt different. Quieter, colder, real. Another message. Mr. Cole, this is urgent. I need to speak with you immediately regarding your father's estate. Estate? Ethan frowned slightly. That didn't make sense. His father had lived simply. Same house for years, same routines. No signs of anything beyond a modest life. If there was an estate, it wasn't something anyone had ever talked about. He stared at the message for a second longer before dialing the number. It rang once, twice. Then a calm, professional voice answered. Mr. Cole? Yes, Ethan said. This is Ethan. A brief pause. Then, I'm glad you called. My name is Charles Whitmore. I represent your father. Ethan leaned against the wall, his grip tightening on the phone. Represent him for what? Another pause. Measured this time. For matters your father chose to keep private, the man said, and matters that now concern you. Ethan's eyes shifted toward the hospital room door. Inside, Vanessa's voice carried faintly through the wall. Still talking, still dismissing him, still convinced she understood everything about him. He lowered his voice. What kind of matters? Whitmore didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said something else. Mr. Cole, are you alone? Ethan hesitated. Then he looked back at the door again and made a decision. Yes, he said. Good, Whitmore replied, because what I'm about to tell you should not be overheard. Ethan's pulse quickened, and for the first time since his father spoke those final words, something inside him shifted, not grief, not confusion. Something else. Your father, Whitmore continued, was not the man you believed him to be. Ethan's breath caught. What are you talking about? He asked. There was a brief silence on the line. Then the words came. I'm on my way to the hospital with documents, Whitmore said. Everything will be explained when I arrive. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, his mind racing, the pieces not fitting together yet. But something was coming, something big. And behind that door, Vanessa was still laughing. Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment after the call ended, staring at his phone like it might explain itself. It didn't. Whitmore's voice had been calm, controlled, not dramatic, not emotional. That was what made it harder to ignore. People didn't speak like that unless they knew exactly what they were saying. And whatever this was, it wasn't small. Inside the room, Vanessa's voice carried again. Louder this time. I'm just saying. We need to be realistic, she said. If there's anything left, we need to figure it out. Now. Not later. Ethan's jaw tightened. Anything left. That's what she thought this was about. A small insurance payout. Maybe a house. Something to divide and move on from. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, the energy shifted again. Vanessa turned toward him immediately. There you are, she said, her tone already edged with irritation. We were just talking about what happens next. Ethan didn't respond right away. His eyes moved past her, back to the bed. His father's breathing had changed again. Shallower, now, slower. There wasn't much time left. Ethan, Vanessa pressed, stepping closer. Are you even listening? I am, he said quietly. Good, her father added. Then let's be clear. Whatever your father leaves behind, it needs to be handled properly. No confusion. No delays. Ethan looked at him. Handled by who? The Ethan let that sit for a second. Family, he repeated. Vanessa crossed her arms again. Don't start twisting words. I'm your wife. That means something. Ethan's gaze shifted to her. It should. Something in his tone made her pause, but only for a second. Look, she said. Softer now, but not kinder. I'm trying to help you. You don't understand how these things work. Paperwork, claims, timelines. If you mess it up, you lose everything. Lose everything. The words echoed strangely in his head. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure that was true. I'll handle it, he said. Her brother laughed. Handle it with what experience? Ethan didn't answer. Because the truth was, he had experience, just not the kind they imagined, not the kind he could explain without opening doors he had kept closed for years. Vanessa stepped even closer, lowering her voice. Ethan, stop being stubborn. If there's anything valuable, we need to secure it fast. People take advantage in situations like this. He held her gaze. And you're not? He asked. The question landed clean. Her expression hardened instantly. Excuse me? You're already talking about what's left, he said. He's still alive. Silence. Sharp this time. Her mother scoffed. We're being practical. That's something you've never been. Ethan exhaled, slowly. Practical. That's what they called it. He looked back at the bed, at the man who had never once spoken about money, never once shown anything beyond a simple life. And yet, now there was a lawyer on the way. Documents. Urgency. Something didn't add up. A nurse stepped in quietly, checking the monitors, adjusting a line. She glanced at Ethan, her expression softening slightly. Stay close, she said gently. He can still hear you. Ethan nodded. Vanessa rolled her eyes but said nothing. Ethan stepped closer again, leaning down slightly. I'm here, Dad, he said under his breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint shift. The monitor beeped irregularly. The nurse turned quickly. Doctor, she called out toward the hallway. Everything moved faster after that. Footsteps. Voices. Equipment. Vanessa stepped back, her expression tightening, not with grief, but with discomfort. This is getting chaotic, her brother muttered. Ethan didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, his hand resting lightly against the bed rail, his eyes locked on his father's face. The doctor stepped in, checking vitals, issuing quiet instructions. Ethan caught fragments, declining fast. Prepare, family should family. The word landed again. Vanessa moved closer behind him. Ethan, she said, her voice lower now, more urgent. We need to talk now. He didn't turn. Not now. Yes, now, she insisted, because once this is over, things move quickly. Legal stuff, claims, accounts. If there's anything, Ethan turned this time, fully, and for the first time there was no restraint left in his expression. No, he said. The word was quiet, but it stopped her. We are not talking about money, he continued. Not here. Not now. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard again. You don't get to decide that alone. I do, he said. He's my father. The room went still again. Her father stepped forward slightly. Watch your tone. Ethan didn't even look at him. Or what? That same question. And again, no one had an answer. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, something darker settling behind them now. Not just frustration, suspicion. You're acting strange, she said slowly. First the attitude, now this. What's going on, Ethan? He held her gaze. Nothing, he said. She didn't believe him, that much was clear, but she also didn't have anything to prove otherwise. Not yet. The doctor stepped back slightly, his expression serious. You might want to say your goodbyes. The words hit harder than anything else in the room. Vanessa went quiet. Even her family stepped back. Ethan turned away from them completely and leaned closer to the bed. His voice dropped. I'm here, he said again. For a second, nothing. Then Elijah's chest rose sharply. A strained breath. His lips moved again. Ethan leaned closer, his heart pounding. Don't, his father whispered, barely audible. Ethan strained to hear. Let them. The words broke. The monitor stuttered. The nurse moved quickly. Sir, but Elijah's eyes shifted, just slightly, toward Ethan. And in that brief, fading moment, there was clarity, recognition, warning. Then the monitor dropped into a long, flat tone. Everything stopped. For a second, the world held its breath. Then the doctor spoke quietly. Time of death, Ethan didn't hear the rest. Because behind him, Vanessa exhaled. Not a sob, not grief, relief. Well, she said softly, almost under her breath. Now we can finally figure out what he left behind. Ethan's hands curled into fists at his sides, and in his pocket, his phone vibrated again. A new message. I'm here. Room number? The flat line still echoed in Ethan's ears. Long after the doctor stepped away and the nurse quietly turned off the monitor. Everything that followed felt distant, muted, like it was happening behind glass. Vanessa didn't cry. She adjusted her coat. Her mother whispered something about calling relatives. Her brother stepped into the hallway, already on his phone, his voice low but urgent. Yeah, he just passed. We need to move fast. There might be assets. Ethan stopped listening. His attention dropped to his phone again. I'm here. Room number? Whitmore. He hadn't responded yet. For a second, he just stared at the message. the weight of it pressing against everything else that had just happened. Then he typed, "Room 417. He hit send. Vanessa turned back toward him. "Ethan," she said, softer now, almost rehearsed. "I know this is hard, but we really need to talk about next steps." He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Funeral arrangements, paperwork, insurance." "There's a process," Ethan said quietly. She blinked. "Exactly, and we should start it now. We don't even have a death certificate yet." The words came out clean, precise. Vanessa paused. "You know that?" she asked. Ethan didn't look at her. "It's standard." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Since when do you know anything about this?" He didn't respond. Because the truth was, he didn't know everything, but he knew enough to understand one thing. This wasn't something you rushed. Not legally, not financially, and definitely not with people who were already calculating before the body was even cold. The door opened quietly. A man stepped in. Mid-50s. Gray suit. Clean lines, no wasted movement. He didn't look around the room first. He looked straight at Ethan. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice steady, respectful. Ethan felt it immediately. The difference. Not just in tone, but in recognition. Vanessa turned, confused. "Who is this?" The man didn't answer her. He stepped forward, extending a hand to Ethan. "Charles Whitmore." Ethan shook it. Firm. Grounded. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said. Whitmore gave a slight nod. "Of course." Vanessa looked between them, her expression tightening. "Ethan, what is this?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Whitmore glanced briefly at the bed. His expression softened, just slightly. Then he turned back. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. Ethan nodded once. Then Whitmore reached into his briefcase. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. "Excuse me, but can someone explain what's going on?" Whitmore finally looked at her, measured, polite, detached. "And you are?" he asked. Vanessa blinked. "I'm his wife." Whitmore gave a small, acknowledging nod. "Of course," but the acknowledgement ended there. No deference, no shift in posture, nothing. Vanessa felt it instantly, the difference in how he treated her versus Ethan, and she didn't like it. "Well?" she pressed. "Why are you here?" Whitmore turned back to Ethan. "May we speak privately?" "No," Vanessa said immediately. "Whatever this is, it concerns me too," Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he looked at Whitmore. "It's fine." Whitmore paused for a second, then nodded. "Very well." He opened the briefcase. Inside were documents. Not one. Several. Organized, marked, nothing flashy. But serious. Official. Vanessa leaned slightly, trying to catch a glimpse. "What is that?" "Some kind of will." Whitmore didn't answer her. Instead, he placed one folder carefully on the table beside Ethan. "Before we proceed," he said calmly, "I need to confirm your identity." Vanessa scoffed. "His identity. He's..." Whitmore didn't even glance at her. "Mr. Cole," he repeated, "for legal purposes." Ethan nodded. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed over his ID. Whitmore examined it briefly, then returned it. "Thank you." Vanessa crossed her arms again, her patience thinning. "This is ridiculous. He's not some CEO or public figure. Why are you acting like this is a corporate transaction?" Whitmore closed the briefcase halfway. Then he looked at her again. This time, there was a hint of something sharper behind his eyes. "Because," he said calmly, "it is." The word landed harder than anything else that had been said. Vanessa frowned. What does that even mean? Ethan felt the shift, the moment tightening. This was the edge, the line between what they believed and what was actually real. Whitmore turned back to him. "There are matters that require your immediate attention," he said. "However, given the circumstances, we can proceed at your discretion." Ethan looked at the folder, at the weight of it, at everything it represented. Then he looked back at the bed, his father, gone, but not silent, not entirely. "Don't let them," the words echoed again. Ethan straightened slightly. His voice, when it came, was steady. "We proceed," he said. Vanessa's head snapped toward him. "Proceed," and didn't answer. Whitmore opened the folder. The first page shifted into view. Dense text, legal structure, signatures, numbers. Vanessa stepped close, despite herself. "What is that?" she demanded. Whitmore didn't respond. Instead, he slid the document slightly closer to Ethan. "Only Ethan, you'll want to review the terms carefully," Whitmore said. Ethan's eyes moved across the page. He didn't read everything. Not yet, but he saw enough names, entities, structures that didn't belong to a small estate. Vanessa leaned in further, trying to read an upside down. "Ethan, what is that? Is that a will?" Ethan didn't look at her. No, he said quietly. Her voice sharpened. Then what is it? He lifted his gaze. Met hers. And for the first time since the hospital, there was something in his eyes she couldn't place. Not confusion. Not weakness. Something else. Something steady. Something she had never bothered to look for before. It's not what you think, he said. Vanessa stared at him, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she understood her own husband anymore. Behind them, the hallway buzzed faintly with movement. Inside the room, the air felt heavier, thicker. Whitmore closed the folder slightly. Mr. Cole, he said, his tone low now, precise. There is one clause you should be aware of before anything else is discussed. Ethan's attention snapped back. What clause? Whitmore held his gaze, the one that determines who has access to everything your father built, and who doesn't. Vanessa's breath caught, and Ethan felt for the first time that whatever came next was going to change far more than just money. Vanessa didn't breathe, not fully. Not after the word everything left Whitmore's mouth and settled into the room like something heavy and permanent. She laughed once, short and sharp, like she could cut through it. This is insane. Ethan, what is he talking about? Ethan didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on Whitmore. Explain it, he said. Whitmore gave a single nod, then opened the folder fully this time. He turned it slightly, not enough for Vanessa to read clearly, but enough that Ethan could see the structure. Your father established the Carter Family Trust over 3 decades ago, Whitmore said. It has since grown into a diversified holding structure. Real estate, private equity, institutional stakes. Vanessa frowned. Carter? That's not even your last name. Whitmore ignored her. The trust is currently valued at approximately $10.4 billion, he continued, his tone even. All assets are held under layered entities for privacy and protection. The number didn't land all at once. It fractured the air. Vanessa blinked. 10, what? Ethan didn't react outwardly, but something shifted inside him. 10 billion. His father had lived in a modest house, worn the same watch for years, drove his own car, never once acted like a man who controlled that kind of wealth, and yet don't let them. The warning made more sense now. Whitmore slid a page forward. Upon his passing, the trust transfers controlling authority to a single successor, he said. Ethan's jaw tightened. Me. Whitmore met his gaze. Yes, Vanessa stepped forward abruptly. Okay, hold on. This has to be some mistake. Ethan, this is ridiculous. Your dad wasn't. He was, Whitmore said calmly. That stopped her, cold. He was the primary architect and controlling authority behind the trust. Publicly, he remained out of view. Privately, he directed major acquisitions and held decisive voting power across multiple firms. Vanessa stared at Ethan now, not mocking, not dismissive, trying to reconcile something that didn't fit. This doesn't make sense, she said. We've struggled. We've had to budget, you said. Said what I knew, Ethan replied quietly. And it was true, mostly. He hadn't known the full scale, but he had known his father wasn't ordinary. He had known there were things not being said. He just hadn't pushed. Whitmore reached for another document. This is the succession agreement, he said. It outlines your authority, your obligations, and the conditions under which control is maintained. Vanessa leaned closer again, unable to stop herself. Then I'm part of that too, right? As his wife? Whitmore didn't even look at her this time, no. The word hit harder than anything else. Her expression snapped. Excuse me. The trust is structured to remain insulated from marital claims unless specific conditions are met, Whitmore continued. Those conditions are not currently satisfied. Vanessa's face flushed. That's not how marriage works. It is how this trust works, Whitmore replied. Ethan watched her, really watched her, for the first time without trying to explain himself. Without trying to soften anything, she looked different now. Not because she had changed, but because he was finally seeing her clearly. What conditions? Ethan asked. Whitmore's tone shifted slightly, more deliberate. There is a protective clause, he said, inserted by your father. It addresses potential external influence over the successor. Vanessa crossed her arms. External influence? What is that supposed to mean? Whitmore finally looked at her again. Direct, unblinking. It refers to individuals who may attempt to manipulate, coerce, or exert pressure on the successor for financial gain. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sharp. Vanessa laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. So what? I'm the villain now? Because I want transparency? Ethan didn't respond. Whitmore continued. If such behavior is documented or substantiated, he said, the clause allows for immediate restriction of access. Not just to funds, but to any associated benefits. Vanessa's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then she recovered. That's extreme. It is intentional, Whitmore said. Ethan felt something settle inside him. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Just clarity. His father hadn't just hidden the truth. He had built something to protect it. To protect him. Vanessa stepped closer again, her voice softer now, controlled. Ethan, she said, we need to think about this carefully. This is a lot. We shouldn't let some lawyer start drawing lines between us. Ethan met her eyes. For a moment he saw the version of her he had believed in, the one who smiled without calculation, the one who didn't measure everything. But that version felt distant now, faded. We already have lines, he said quietly. Her expression tightened. What is that supposed to mean? He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. She knew the laughter, the words, the way she had stood behind him while his father was dying and called him nothing. Whitmore closed the folder gently. There is one more matter, he said. Ethan looked at him. What? Whitmore's gaze was steady. The board has already been notified. Ethan frowned slightly. What board? The governing board of the trust's primary holding entity, Whitmore said. They will require confirmation of succession. A formal session has been scheduled. Vanessa's head turned sharply. A board? Like a corporate board? Yes. When? Whitmore glanced at his watch. Tomorrow morning. The timing hit like a second shock. Too fast. Too close. Vanessa stepped in again, urgency rising in her voice. That's not enough time. Ethan, you can't just walk into something like that. You don't even know what you're dealing with. Ethan didn't move, didn't react, because part of him did know, not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that whatever came next, he couldn't walk into it as the man they thought he was. Whitmore reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a smaller envelope. This contains preliminary documents you should review tonight, he said. There are also contact numbers for advisors who report directly to you. Ethan took it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Responsibility didn't arrive gradually, it dropped all at once. Vanessa watched him closely now. No laughter, no mocking, just calculation fast, adjusting. Ethan, she said, her voice lower, almost careful, we should go home. We can go through this together. Figure out what this means for us. Ethan looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, he didn't see a partner standing beside him. He saw someone trying to step into something she had already dismissed. Someone who had already chosen differently when she thought there was nothing to gain. I'm not going home tonight, he said. Her expression froze. What? I have things to review. Ethan, I'll call you, he added. It wasn't a promise. It was distance. She felt it. He saw it land. Whitmore closed his briefcase. I'll have a car arranged, he said quietly to Ethan. We should ensure you're prepared for tomorrow. Ethan nodded once. Vanessa stepped back slowly, like she had just realized the ground had shifted under her and she hadn't noticed when it started. This isn't over, she said. Ethan didn't argue. Because she was right. It wasn't. Not even close. As Whitmore moved toward the door, his phone buzzed. He checked it briefly. Then looked back at Ethan. There's been an update, he said. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. What kind of update? Whitmore held his gaze. One of the board members has requested a private pre-meeting with you. Ethan frowned. Why? Whitmore's voice dropped just enough to change the air again. Because, he said, they're not sure you're who your father intended to put in control. The room went still. And for the first time since the reveal began, Ethan realized this wasn't just about what he was inheriting. It was about whether he would be allowed to keep it. Ethan didn't leave the hospital right away. The hallway outside room 417 was quieter now, the earlier rush replaced by the low hum of distant conversations and the occasional squeak of a cart rolling past. Vanessa and her family had already gone. She hadn't argued again. That unsettled him more than anything she had said earlier. Silence from her wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Whitmore walked beside him without speaking as they moved toward the elevator. He didn't rush. He didn't fill the air with unnecessary explanations. That alone told Ethan something. This man was used to dealing with power. not reacting to it, managing it. Once inside the elevator, the doors closed with a soft thud. For a moment, it was just the two of them, reflected in the mirrored walls. Ethan looked at him, the board member. "Who is it?" Whitmore didn't hesitate. "Richard Halston." Ethan searched the name in his mind. "Nothing. That name should mean something to me?" "It will," Whitmore said. "He's been on the board since before your father formalized the current trust structure. Old money, old influence. He doesn't like uncertainty. And I'm uncertainty." Whitmore met his eyes in the reflection. "You're an unknown variable stepping into a system that values control." The elevator chimed. They stepped out into the lobby. Night had settled outside, the glass doors reflecting city lights and passing traffic. A black sedan waited near the curb, engine running. Ethan slowed slightly. "What does he want from me?" Whitmore adjusted his cuff, his tone measured, likely to assess whether you're capable, or whether you can be guided. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Guided, controlled, replaced if necessary. And if he decides I'm not? Whitmore stopped walking, turned to face him fully. "Then he'll try to influence the board before tomorrow's session," he said. "Not to remove you, that's not simple, but to limit your authority. Place conditions. Oversight." Ethan nodded slowly. "So this isn't just about inheritance." "No," Whitmore said. "It never was." Outside, a nurse laughed softly as she passed by, the sound out of place against the weight pressing down on Ethan's chest. He looked down at the envelope in his hand. He hadn't opened it yet. Didn't feel ready to. But time wasn't waiting. Whitmore gestured toward the car. "We should go. I've arranged for a private office where you can review everything tonight." Ethan hesitated for half a second, then nodded. They stepped outside. The air was colder than he expected. Sharp, real. The driver opened the door without a word. Ethan slid into the back seat. Whitmore followed. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, blending into the late-night traffic. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Ethan stared out the window, at the city, at people moving through their lives, unaware of how quickly everything could shift. His phone buzzed. "Vanessa, a text. We need to talk. This changes everything." Ethan stared at the message, then locked the screen. He didn't respond. Whitmore noticed but said nothing. After a moment, Ethan broke the silence. "You said there were advisors." Whitmore nodded. "Financial, legal, operational. Most of them have worked under your father for years. They'll recognize you, but they won't automatically trust you." "Why not?" "Because your father never introduced you formally into the structure." Whitmore said. "He kept you separate, protected." Ethan leaned back slightly, or hidden. Whitmore considered that, yes, he said. "That too." The car turned into a quieter part of the city. Less traffic, taller buildings, glass and steel. Ethan's reflection stared back at him in the window. He didn't look different, but he didn't feel like the same man who had walked into that hospital room hours ago. "I need to know everything," Ethan said. "You will," Whitmore replied, "but not all at once. Tonight, we focus on what matters for tomorrow." "And what matters?" Whitmore looked at him directly now, understanding what you're stepping into, and deciding how you want to be seen. Ethan frowned slightly. "Seen?" "The board doesn't just evaluate facts," Whitmore said. "They evaluate presence, judgment, control. They'll be watching how you respond to pressure." Ethan let that settle. Pressure. He almost laughed. They had no idea what kind of pressure he had already stood through, watching his father die, listening to his wife call him nothing, standing still while everything around him shifted. "I won't pretend to be someone I'm not," Ethan said. Whitmore gave a small nod. "Good. But understand, who you are now carries weight, whether you claim it or not." The car slowed, pulled into a private underground entrance. Security gates opened without question, another sign. This world moved differently. Inside, the space was quiet. Controlled, professional. They stepped out. Whitmore led him into an office suite, minimalist but unmistakably expensive in ways that didn't try to prove anything. A table, clean lines, a single folder already waiting. Ethan paused. "You set this up already?" "Yes. You knew this was coming." Whitmore didn't deny it. "Your father made sure we were prepared." Ethan walked to the table, set the envelope down. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he opened it. Inside were documents, names, structures, contact numbers, and one page, separate from the rest, typed. Not legal language. Personal. Ethan picked it up, recognized the handwriting immediately. His father's. Just not a full letter, just a few lines. They will test you. Not because you're weak, but because they need to know you're not. Trust no one who moves too quickly toward you after I'm gone. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. Vanessa's face flashed in his mind, her sudden shift. Her careful tone, her timing. Whitmore watched him quietly. Is something wrong? Ethan folded the paper slowly. No, he said. Then he looked up, and there was something different in his eyes now. Not confusion, not hesitation, focus. They're meeting me tomorrow, he said. Then I meet him tonight. Whitmore studied him for a second, then nodded once. I'll arrange it. Ethan placed the paper back on the table, carefully, deliberately. For the first time since everything started, he wasn't reacting anymore. He was choosing. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Vanessa. Longer this time. More urgent. He didn't read it. Didn't need to. Instead, he reached for the contact list in the envelope, scrolled once, then stopped. A name stood out, Daniel Brooks, tagged under. Associated External Contacts, Real Estate Sector. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. A connection. Unexpected, but not random. He looked up at Whitmore. Why is Daniel Brooks listed here? Whitmore's expression shifted just enough to matter. You know him? Ethan didn't answer right away, because now pieces were starting to move into place, and not all of them were coincidence. Whitmore closed the briefcase slowly. That, he said, is something we need to discuss before your meeting tonight. The room went quiet again. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was sharp. Because Ethan realized, this wasn't just about his father's world. It was already tangled with his own, and he had no idea how deep that connection really went. Whitmore didn't answer immediately. He walked to the far side of the office, set his briefcase down, and took a moment as if deciding how much to say, and how fast. Ethan didn't rush him. He stood still, the paper with his father's handwriting still resting on the table behind him, the name Daniel Brooks lingering in his mind like something unfinished. Finally, Whitmore turned. Daniel Brooks is not a random contact, he said. He's tied to several real estate acquisitions that pass through entities connected to the trust. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his focus sharpened. Meaning? Meaning, Whitmore continued. He operates in spaces where your father's capital was either directly involved or indirectly influencing outcomes. Ethan let that settle, then asked the question that mattered. Does he know? Whitmore shook his head. No, not specifically. The structure is designed so most external partners never know who sits at the top. They interact with layers, firms, funds, representatives. So to him, Ethan said, it's just business. Yes, but the word didn't carry comfort. Because Ethan already knew Daniel wasn't just business. Not anymore. He walked back to the table, picked up the document again, and stared at the line with Daniel's name. Associated External Contacts. Clean, neutral, meaningless on the surface, except it wasn't. Explain the connection, Ethan said. Whitmore stepped closer, his tone precise. Brooks has been aggressively expanding over the 5 years. Leveraged growth, high exposure. Several of his projects were stabilized by capital injections from entities linked to the trust. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. So he depends on it, in part, Whitmore said. Without those structures, some of his positions would be vulnerable. Ethan exhaled slowly. A different kind of clarity began to form. Daniel wasn't just wealthier. He was standing on something he didn't even realize wasn't his. Whitmore continued, Your father preferred indirect control. He allowed operators like Brooks to believe they were independent, while maintaining influence through capital flow. Ethan nodded once, then asked, And now? Now, Whitmore said, those decisions fall to you. The weight of that landed harder than the number 10 billion ever could, because this wasn't abstract anymore. It was personal. Ethan reached for his phone, unlocked it, scrolled. Vanessa's messages filled the screen now, not just one, several. We need to fix this. I didn't know. Ethan, please answer me. He stared at the words. The shift in tone was obvious. No more mocking, no more dismissal, just urgency, and underneath it, fear. He locked the phone again without replying. Whitmore watched him carefully. Your personal situation may intersect with this more than we expected. Ethan didn't look up. It already has. Whitmore paused. You're referring to your wife. Ethan gave a small nod. Then, after a beat, and Daniel. Whitmore's expression didn't change, but something in his posture tightened. "You're certain?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, because certainty didn't come from a single moment. It came from patterns, from the way Vanessa had changed over time, from the way she talked about ambition, about success, about needing more, from the name Daniel Brooks appearing more often than it should have. And now, this. "I don't need proof yet," Ethan said quietly. "I just need to stop pretending I don't see it." Whitmore studied him for a second, then nodded. "That may be wise," he said, "but you should proceed carefully. If there is overlap between your personal and financial worlds, any reaction you make could have broader consequences." Ethan looked at him. "That goes both ways." Whitmore didn't disagree. Silence stretched for a moment. Then Ethan straightened slightly. "What do I need to know before tonight?" Whitmore shifted back into focus immediately. "Halston will test you. He'll push for information you're not obligated to give. He may question your readiness, your knowledge, even your legitimacy." "And? You don't defend yourself emotionally," Whitmore said. "You respond with control, with clarity. If you don't know something, you don't pretend. But you don't show hesitation either." Ethan nodded slowly. "And if he tries to limit me?" Whitmore's eyes held his. "Then you remind him that the trust doesn't transfer authority to the board. It transfers it to you. That mattered. More than anything else said so far. Because for the first time, Ethan wasn't just stepping into something. He was stepping above it. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A different number. "Unknown," he answered. "Ethan Cole," he said. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then a voice, male, smooth, confident. "Ethan," the voice said. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." Ethan didn't need an introduction. He recognized the tone, the kind of tone that assumed access. "Daniel," Ethan said. Whitmore's eyes lifted slightly. "Listening," Daniel chuckled softly. "So you do have my number." "I have a lot of numbers now," replied, a beat of silence. Then Daniel spoke again, more measured this time. "I heard about your father, I'm sorry. He was respected in certain circles. Respected, not known, not understood." Ethan said nothing. Daniel continued, "I figured this might be a difficult time for you. And Vanessa mentioned you might be overwhelmed." There it was, the connection. Out in the open, just enough. Ethan's voice stayed even. "Vanessa talks about me a lot." Another pause. Short, controlled. "We talk," Daniel said. "We've been working on a few things together." Ethan let the words hang. Didn't challenge them, didn't confirm. Just let Daniel keep talking. "I think it would be good for us to meet," Daniel added. "There are opportunities here, especially now, given the changes." "Opportunities," Ethan almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. "You're moving fast," Ethan said. "I prefer not to fall behind," Daniel replied smoothly. Ethan glanced at Whitmore, then back toward the window. City lights reflecting against the glass. "I have a meeting tonight," Ethan said. "With me?" Daniel asked. "No," Ethan replied, "with someone who actually decides things." The line went quiet, just for a second. Then Daniel laughed lightly, like he could smooth it over. "Well, when you're done with that, we should talk. There's a lot you probably don't understand yet." Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the phone. "Maybe," he said. Then he ended the call. No goodbye, no hesitation. The room felt different after that, sharper. Whitmore spoke first. "That confirms it." Ethan nodded. "Yeah. Not just suspicion. Not just assumption. Reality." He set the phone down slowly, then looked at the document again. At Daniel's name. At the structure behind everything. At the power he hadn't asked for, but now held. "They think I'm still the same man," Ethan said quietly. Whitmore didn't respond. Because they both knew that assumption was about to cost someone. Ethan picked up the folder, closed it. "I'm ready for Halston," he said. Whitmore nodded once, then reached for his own phone. "I'll confirm the meeting." As he stepped aside, Ethan stood alone for a moment, in the quiet, in the space between what he had been and what he was about to become. His phone lit up again on the table. A new message, from Vanessa. He glanced at it. This time he read it. "Daniel told me you spoke. Ethan, please don't misunderstand. I was just trying to secure something better for us." Ethan stared at the words, then slowly looked up, and for the first time he understood exactly where he stood, not between two worlds, but above a game they thought he didn't even know he was playing. Behind him, Whitmore ended his call. It's set, she said. Ethan didn't turn around. Good. Whitmore hesitated, then added, There's one more thing you should know before we go. Ethan finally looked back. What? Whitmore's voice lowered. Halston isn't meeting you at an office. Ethan frowned slightly. Then where? Whitmore held his gaze. At one of the trust's private properties. A pause. Then, he requested the location specifically because of its history with your father. Ethan felt something shift again. Another layer, another unknown. Which property? He asked. Whitmore didn't answer immediately. Then he said it, and the name alone made Ethan realize. This meeting wasn't just a test, it was a message, and he had no idea yet what Halston was trying to prove. The drive out to the property took nearly 40 minutes, but Ethan barely noticed the time. He sat in the back seat of the car Whitmore had arranged, watching the city fade into quiet stretches of land lined with old trees and long, gated drives. The further they went, the less familiar it became, not just physically, strategically. Whitmore had gone silent halfway through the ride, reviewing something on his tablet, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts, with Vanessa's message, with Daniel's voice, with the realization that everything around him had been moving long before he ever stepped into it. You've been here before, Whitmore said suddenly, not looking up. Ethan frowned slightly. No. Whitmore glanced at him. You have. You just didn't know what it was. That landed differently. The car slowed as they approached a long, private gate. Security cameras shifted almost immediately, tracking the vehicle before it even stopped. No guard came out. The gate opened anyway. Ethan noticed that. License plate recognition, Whitmore said, and confirmation from the trust. Ethan didn't respond, but something about that detail stayed with him. The car rolled forward, down a long, curved driveway that cut through a wide expanse of land. The house didn't appear right away. When it did, it wasn't what Ethan expected. Not flashy, not modern. It was older, quiet, built like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. Solid. Intentional, a place that didn't need to prove anything. The car stopped. Whitmore stepped out first. Ethan followed a second later. The air cooler here. Cleaner. There were no visible staff waiting. No welcome, just the house, and the silence around it. This property isn't listed anywhere publicly, Whitmore said. It's been held under layered ownership for years. Ethan looked at the structure, something in his chest tightening slightly. Why here? He asked. Whitmore met his gaze. Because your father used to bring people here when he wanted to see who they really were. Ethan didn't like the sound of that, but he understood it. They walked up the steps together. The door opened before they reached it. A man stood inside, tall, older. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Sharp eyes. No attempt to appear welcoming, Halston. He didn't extend his hand, didn't smile. He just looked at Ethan, long enough to make most people uncomfortable. Ethan didn't look away. Halston stepped aside slightly. You're late. We're on time, Whitmore replied calmly. Halston's eyes flicked to him, then back to Ethan. Come in, he said. No apology, no acknowledgement, just control. Ethan walked in. The interior matched the outside. Old but precise. Nothing excessive, but everything expensive in a way that didn't need explanation. Halston led them into a large room with a long table at the center. 3 chairs, 1 at the head, 2 on the side. Halston took the head seat without asking. Whitmore remained standing. Ethan didn't sit immediately. He looked at the chair, then at Halston. Then he sat. Not as a guest, but not as someone asking permission either. Halston noticed. Of course he did. You don't look like your father, Halston said. Ethan met his eyes. I wasn't trying to. A small pause. Halston leaned back, studying him. Do you know why you're here? He asked. Yes, then tell me. Ethan didn't rush. You want to know if I'm capable of holding control over something I didn't build. Halston's lips pressed into a thin line. Not quite approval. But not dismissal either, and Halston asked. Ethan's voice stayed even. I don't think that's the real question. Halston tilted his head slightly. What is? Whether I understand what it actually controls. That shifted something. Small, but real. Halston's fingers tapped once against the table. Then answer that. Ethan didn't look at Whitmore. Didn't ask for help. The trust isn't just capital, he said. It's leverage. It stabilizes markets without being visible. It creates dependency without ownership being obvious. Halston watched him closely. Ethan continued, People think they're operating independently, but they're not. They're moving within structures that can be adjusted without them ever knowing why things change. Silence. Then Halston spoke again. "And you're comfortable with that?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'm aware of it." That answer mattered more than confidence. Halston leaned forward slightly. "Awareness doesn't equal control." "No," Ethan said. "But pretending I don't understand it would be worse." Whitmore stayed quiet, watching. Halston's gaze sharpened. "Then let's test that awareness." He reached to the side and slid a thin folder across the table toward Ethan. Ethan opened it. Inside were documents, financial breakdowns, property structures, names. One name stood out immediately: Daniel Brooks. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in him locked into place. Halston watched him. "Recognize anything?" Ethan closed the folder slowly. "Yes, and?" Ethan looked up. "He's overexposed." Halston's eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." "His expansion is too aggressive," Ethan said. "He's relying on capital support he doesn't control. If that support shifts, he won't have time to adjust." Halston studied him. "Longer this time. And what would you do?" he asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't theoretical anymore. This was personal. But Halston didn't know that, and Ethan wasn't going to tell him. "Nothing yet," Ethan said. That answer caught Halston off guard. "Why?" he pressed. "Because action without full visibility creates unnecessary risk," Ethan replied. "I want to understand the full structure before making a move." Halston leaned back again. Slowly. "You sound cautious." "I am. That can look like weakness." Ethan held his gaze. "Or control." Another pause. Then Halston gave a small nod. The first real acknowledgement. But it didn't last. "Let's see how controlled you really are," Halston said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, placed it on the table. Closer to Ethan this time. Ethan glanced down. It wasn't financial. It wasn't corporate. It was personal. A set of transaction records. Dates. Ethan's eyes moved quickly, then stopped. Hotel. Dinner reservations, transfers, all tied to one name, Vanessa, and another, Daniel Brooks. The room went quiet. Whitmore didn't move. Halston didn't speak. Ethan didn't react outwardly, but inside everything aligned. Not suspicion anymore, not assumption, proof. Clean, documented, impossible to deny. Halston watched him carefully. "Still nothing?" Ethan looked up. His voice stayed steady. "No." Halston's eyes sharpened. "Even now?" Ethan closed the file. "Set it down, especially now." That answer hung in the air, heavy. Controlled. Halston studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Good. Not approval, not praise. Something else, recognition." But it didn't make the situation easier, because now Ethan wasn't just dealing with betrayal. He was holding evidence, power, and timing. Halston leaned back. "You'll do for now. For now." Ethan stood. Didn't argue. Didn't push. He didn't need to, because the real decisions weren't happening in this room. Not yet. As he turned to leave, Halston spoke again. "One last thing." Ethan stopped. Halston's voice was calm, measured. "If you hesitate too long, someone else will make the move for you." Ethan looked back at him. "And you think that's him?" he asked. Halston didn't answer directly, but the look in his eyes said enough. Ethan walked out. Whitmore followed. The door closed behind them with a quiet, final sound. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. Whitmore finally spoke. "You handled that well." Ethan didn't respond. He was already thinking ahead, already moving pieces. They reached the car. Ethan paused before getting in, looked back at the house, at everything it represented. Then he got in. As the car pulled away, his phone lit up again. Another message, this time from Daniel. "We need to talk tonight. It's urgent." Ethan stared at the screen, then slowly typed back, "Name the place." The reply came almost instantly. An address. Ethan looked at it, recognized it immediately, not because he had been there, but because he had just seen it in the file Halston handed him. Same location, same pattern, same mistake. Ethan locked the phone, leaned back, and for the first time since everything started, he made a decision. Not to react, not to confront, but to step into the situation on his terms. He turned to Whitmore. "Change of plans," he said. Whitmore looked at him. "What are you thinking?" Ethan's voice stayed calm. "We're going to that meeting." Whitmore studied him for a moment, then nodded. Understood. Ethan looked out the window again, the city lights getting closer now, everything returning. Except nothing was the same anymore. Because tonight, for the first time, Ethan wasn't walking into a conversation blind. He was walking in with the truth, and they had no idea. The restaurant Daniel chose sat on the top floor of a glass tower, the kind of place that didn't list prices and didn't need to. Soft lighting, polished marble, and a view of the city that made everything below look small. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early. Not because he was eager, because he wanted control. He stepped out of the car without waiting for the driver to open the door and walked in like he had been there before. No hesitation, no pause at the entrance. The hostess greeted him with the practiced smile reserved for people who belonged. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" Ethan gave Daniel's name. Something shifted in her expression. Subtle, but there. Respect. Of course. They're expecting you, they. Not him. Ethan caught that detail and followed her through the restaurant. Daniel had chosen a corner table, private, strategic. A place where conversation stayed contained. Vanessa was already there. She looked different tonight, not just dressed well, careful. Her posture was softer, her expression warmer, the kind of warmth she hadn't shown him in months. Daniel stood as Ethan approached, offering a hand with an easy smile. "Ethan, I appreciate you coming." Ethan shook his hand once, firm, neutral. Vanessa watched him closely, searching for something in his face. Guilt, anger, weakness. She didn't find it. "Sit," Daniel said, gesturing to the chair across from them. Ethan did. The waiter appeared almost immediately, pouring water, offering menus. Ethan didn't open his. He already knew what this meeting was. Daniel leaned back slightly, relaxed in a way that was practiced. "I figured we should talk like adults. No drama." Ethan met his gaze. "Then don't bring any." A brief pause. Vanessa forced a small laugh, trying to soften the tension. "Ethan, we're not here to fight." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second something flickered beneath the surface. Not anger. Recognition. Then it was gone. "Then say what you need to say," he said calmly. Daniel nodded, as if he had expected that. "All right," he said. "I'll be direct. Vanessa told me you've been going through a lot. With your father, everything." Ethan didn't respond. Daniel continued, anyway. "And I understand things haven't been working between you two for a while." That word again, working. Like it had been a business arrangement. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, placing her hand on the table. Not touching Ethan, just close enough to suggest something familiar. "We both know this isn't what we planned," she said, her voice softer than it had been in the hospital. "But we have to be realistic." Ethan's eyes stayed on her. "Realistic?" he repeated. Daniel nodded. "Exactly. And realistically, dragging this out doesn't help anyone. It's better to handle things cleanly." Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. "Cleanly," he said. Vanessa exhaled slowly, as if relieved he wasn't pushing back yet. "We've already spoken to a lawyer." Of course they had. Ethan didn't react outwardly. But inside, he noted it. Timing. Preparation. Intent. Daniel slid a folder across the table. Not aggressively, casually, like it was a reasonable next step. "We drafted something," Daniel said. "Nothing complicated. Just a clean separation. It protects both sides." Ethan didn't reach for it. Not yet. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to him. "It's fair, Ethan. You don't have to worry about anything." That word again. Fair. Ethan finally placed his hand on the folder. But he didn't open it. "Who's the lawyer?" he asked. Vanessa hesitated for half a second before answering. "A firm Daniel works with." That told him enough. Not neutral. Not independent. Daniel leaned forward slightly, tone still calm. "They're reputable. We're not trying to take advantage of you." Ethan's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the folder. He tapped it once. "Then why is it already drafted?" he asked. Silence. Brief. Controlled. "Vanessa recovered first, because we didn't want to put you under pressure. We wanted to make this easier for you." Easier. Ethan opened the folder slowly. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second. He didn't rush, didn't skim. He read every line. Vanessa watched him, her confidence slowly returning as the silence stretched. Daniel remained composed, but his gaze stayed fixed on Ethan's reactions. They were waiting for something. Confusion, maybe relief, but Ethan gave them nothing. Just quiet focus. The terms were exactly what he expected. Minimal settlement, no claim to future assets, no investigation into shared finances, and a clause, buried carefully. Any delay or contesting of the agreement would trigger financial penalties. Pressure, subtle, but deliberate. Ethan closed the folder, placed it back on the table, then looked at them. Interesting, he said. Vanessa smiled slightly, mistaking his tone. It's straightforward. Ethan tilted his head just a fraction. It's efficient. Daniel nodded. That's the idea. Ethan let a small silence settle between them. Then he asked, Did you draft this before or after the hospital? Vanessa's smile faltered. Daniel answered instead. After? Of course. Ethan held his gaze, didn't blink, didn't argue. Just let the moment stretch long enough to make the answer uncomfortable. Then he looked back at Vanessa. And you think this is fair? He asked. Her voice was steady again. Yes. Ethan nodded once slowly, as if accepting that answer, but he didn't reach for a pen, didn't push the folder back. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, calm, composed, and completely unreadable. You should have waited, he said. Vanessa frowned slightly. For what? Ethan's eyes met hers. For me to understand what you were asking for. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Daniel's expression tightened just slightly. He felt it. Something shifting. Ethan picked up the folder again, closed it more firmly this time, then slid it back across the table, not aggressively, but decisively. I'm not signing this tonight, he said. Vanessa's expression changed instantly. Ethan, don't make this harder than it has to be. Daniel's tone sharpened a fraction. You should at least consider the consequences of dragging this out. There it was. Pressure. Ethan looked at him. Consequences, he repeated. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I agree, he said. That answer threw them both off. Vanessa blinked. Then, but not the ones you think, Ethan added calmly. Silence dropped over the table, thicker this time. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean? Ethan stood, smooth, controlled. No hesitation. It means, he said, adjusting his jacket, you're both working with incomplete information. Vanessa's chest tightened. Ethan, he didn't let her finish. For now, he added. That word hung there. Heavy. Temporary. Daniel pushed his chair back slightly, tension rising beneath his calm exterior. If you're trying to play games, I'm not, Ethan said quietly, and that was the truth. That was what made it worse. He looked at Vanessa one last time. Not with anger, not with desperation, just clarity. You should get your own lawyer, he said. Her expression faltered again. Why? Ethan held her gaze. Because she deserved to hear it, even if she didn't understand yet. Because the next version of this conversation won't look like this one, he said. Daniel stood now too, irritation creeping in. You don't get to dictate terms here. Ethan didn't even look at him. That was the difference. He no longer needed to engage. I'll be in touch, Ethan said. Then he turned and walked away. No rush, no hesitation, just control. Behind him, Vanessa's voice followed, sharper now. Ethan, don't walk away from this. He didn't stop, didn't turn, because for the first time he wasn't the one being left behind. As he reached the exit, his phone vibrated. A message from Whitmore. Short. Direct. Board meeting confirmed tomorrow morning. Ethan paused just long enough to read it, then slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept walking, because now the next move wasn't about reacting to betrayal. It was about stepping into power, and they still had no idea what they had just triggered. The courtroom had been quiet when the judge finalized the order. No dramatic outbursts, no last-minute reversals. Just a measured voice confirming what had already become inevitable. Vanessa lost her claim. Not just to the trust, but to anything tied to it. The clause embedded in the Carter family trust held firm. Her actions, documented manipulation, coercion, and financial intent disqualified her from any benefit connected to Ethan's inheritance. Daniel's position collapsed soon after. The financial backing he depended on shifted, just as Ethan had predicted. Not abruptly, not vindictively, just enough. Quiet adjustments, invisible from the outside, but devastating underneath. Projects stalled. Investors pulled back. The structure he had built couldn't hold its weight without support he never realized he didn't control. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Weeks later, Ethan stood in a different room. Not a hospital, not a courtroom. A boardroom. Glass walls, clean lines, the city stretching below. People sat around the table, men and women who had spent years moving pieces behind industries without ever being seen. Now they were looking at him. Not with doubt, with expectation. Whitmore stood near the window, silent as always. Halston remained seated, watching, measuring, the same way he had from the beginning. Ethan didn't rush into the moment. He didn't need to. He understood now what his father had built. Not just wealth, not just control. Structure. Something that lasted beyond any single person. "Mr. Cole," one of the board members said, breaking the silence, "we're ready to proceed when you are." Ethan looked around the table, at the faces, at the weight of it. Then he nodded. "Let's begin." The meeting moved forward with precision. Reports, approvals, decisions. Ethan listened more than he spoke, but when he did, it was clear, direct, grounded. Not trying to prove anything, just making decisions. That was the difference. No one questioned him, because he didn't act like someone who needed validation. He acted like someone who understood responsibility. After the meeting ended, most of the room cleared out quietly. Whitmore approached him, handing over a small folder. "Your father left this for you," he said. Ethan took it, opened it. Inside was a single letter. Handwritten, he recognized the handwriting immediately. He didn't read it right away. Not there. He slipped it into his jacket and stepped out of the building. The city felt different now. Not because it had changed, because he had. Later that evening, Ethan stood alone in the house his father had kept hidden for so long. The same quiet place, the same stillness. He finally unfolded the letter. It was short, direct, just like everything his father had ever done. "You were never meant to carry this alone. But I needed to know you could stand without it. Money makes people reveal who they are. I wanted you to learn who they were before you ever knew what you had. Now you know both." Ethan read it twice, then folded it carefully. There was no anger, no resentment. Just understanding. That was the resentment, but that's not the clarity. A few later, Vanessa reached out. Not through lawyers, not through anyone else. Directly, a simple message. "Can we talk?" Ethan stared at it for a long moment, then agreed. They met in a quiet cafe. No luxury, no performance. Just a table and two people who no longer shared anything but the past. Vanessa looked different. Not polished, not composed, just tired. She didn't smile this time. "I didn't know," she said. Ethan nodded slightly. "I know." Her voice shook just a little. "If I had," he shook his head once. "You wouldn't have," he said. That stopped her, because they both understood. It wasn't about what she knew. It was about what she chose to value. She looked down at her hands. "I made a mistake." Ethan didn't argue. He just said, "We made a decision." There was a difference. She looked back up at him, eyes softer now. "Is there anything left to fix?" Ethan held her gaze. Not cold, not cruel, just honest. "No." The word landed clean. Final. She exhaled slowly, like she had expected it but still hoped for something else. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "I believe you," he said. And he did. But that didn't change anything. That was the boundary. That was the dignity. He stood first, not abruptly, just finished. Vanessa didn't stop him this time, didn't reach for him, because now she understood. Too late. Ethan walked out of the cafe into the open air. No weight on his chest, no anger left to carry. Just space, freedom, and something steady underneath it. He wasn't walking away from loss. He was walking towards something new, something his. Not built on proving himself. Not built on being seen. Just built on truth. Because in the end, it was never about being a billionaire heir. It was about knowing who stayed when you had nothing, and who disappeared the moment they thought you did. Some people lose love. Others lose everything. She lost both. If you've ever had to choose between holding on and walking away, you already know which one takes more strength.